We live in a fabricated world, built upon manufactured ideologies, beliefs, and misguided perceptions. Words themselves have lost their meaning, and people regard as civilization a construction that, in essence, works against them. The crucial question is, how do we break these chains that we ourselves have ultimately created? Truth, the secret of remembering. Aletheia, truth in Greek, a word symbol that dominates Greek philosophical tradition. We constantly seek it, believing it to be something we must acquire from the outside world, a sort of prize won through laborious research. Yet, ancient Greek philosophy and the language itself whisper something very different to us. Truth is not what we find, but what we remember. And if you look at the word itself, the Greek language confirms this. Aletheia is composed of the privative alpha and the root lethe, forgetfulness. A-lethe, non-forgetting. That which you remember after having forgotten. But lethe hides something else. It stems from the verb lanthano, to remain hidden, to go unnoticed. So aletheia is also that which can no longer remain concealed. Truth in Greek thought is not a static state, it is an active unveiling. And if you turn the word even further, aletheia, theia, ali, the theon, thea from theon, from theo, to run, to move, and tithemi, to set, to arrange, to order, and ali means turning or orbit. So, a divine rotation, the right movement in the right proportion, not around something outside you, but toward what you are. What Aristotle called entelecheia, the realization of your own nature. Just as a galaxy needs the right proportions between its forces to emerge and hold, so do we, not by adding more, but by aligning what is already there. It is this fundamental principle that leads us to Heraclitus and to a single word, Anchibasien. From anchi, which means near, and veno, to go or to walk or to move forward. Rendered as approach with agonizing doubt or questioning. It is not a relaxed stroll, it is a distressed step toward the unknown. Diogenes Laertius tells us that Heraclitus left his writings in the temple of Artemis only for the dynameni, those with the inner power to truly see. The deeper meaning of Anchibasien is the vigilance, the awakening of being from lethe toward the universal logos from which it draws its energy. Anchibasien is not a philosophical method, it is an act of self-activation. The conscious movement of the human being to shake off lethe, forgetfulness and error, and approach the universal logos itself, the very source of energy. For Heraclitus, the logos is the eternal order, the fire that regulates everything that flows, and the source of true knowledge and vital energy. Anchibasien is the closest step we can take that brings us back into contact with the very source of existence. Platonic Anamnesis, the knowledge that already exists. The idea of vigilance from Lethe is essentially the foundation of Plato's theory of anamnesis, recollection. Plato argues that the soul, before being embodied, had a direct vision of the ideas, the eternal and immutable prototypes of truth and beauty. Birth and entry into the material world bring the forgetting of this knowledge. Therefore, true learning, whether mathematical, ethical, philosophical, knowledge of the external world or the internal world, is not acquisition, it is a reconnection. The process of reconnecting pre-existing truths stored and inactive within us. Heraclitean Anchibasien is the active movement toward knowledge. Platonic Anamnesis is the philosophical explanation of that movement. Knowledge is within us and awaits its awakening. So the question is no longer what is true, but what have we forgotten? And this forgetting, this lethe, does not work in one direction, it works in three. Three ways it keeps you asleep. The first is the language. The words you inherited are not neutral. They carry the weight of a system that defined them before you could question them. Success, happiness, civilization, progress. These words arrived already filled with someone else's meaning. And Heraclitus knew this. He wrote deliberately obscure so that only those who had already begun to question would understand. Not because he wanted to exclude people, but because he knew that a word received passively is not understood, it is merely absorbed. Break them open. What does success mean beyond money and power? What does happiness mean beyond consumption? What is civilization beyond consumer models? The moment you redefine your language, you begin to redefine your world. Because lethe does not announce itself, it hides inside familiar words. The second is the invisible frameworks you never chose but absorbed. The political, social, economic structures that feel like reality because you have never seen outside them. Anchibasien is the agonizing approach precisely because it turns this doubt inward, not just toward institutions, but toward yourself. What do I believe because I have thought it through? And what do I believe because I was never given the space to question it? The chains are not broken from the outside, they are broken from within. This is what Platonic Anamnesis points to. The ideas of justice, the good, the beautiful are not invented, they are remembered. They exist beneath the noise of the fabricated world, waiting to surface. Art, real work, creation, nature and essential relationships, they are the conditions under which remembering becomes possible. And the third is the hardest, because the third is not about language or belief, it is about what you do when you know. Reaction is passive. It moves because someone pushed it. Action moves from within, from choice. And here we have Plutarch. In his essay on listening, he warns that the ear is the most dangerous entrance to the soul, not because listening is wrong, but because passive listening surrenders your logos to whatever fills the air. The solution is not to stop listening, the solution is to listen like Odysseus. Odysseus knew the sirens would sing. He did not pretend they wouldn't. He did not block his ears like his crew. That would have been its own kind of lethe at chosen ignorance. He asked to be tied to the mast, not as a prisoner, but the only man in history who'd heard the sirens fully and survived. The mast is not a prison, it is the axis, the straight line of consciousness that keeps you upright when everything around you pulls you under. And this is Anchibasien in action. You do not retreat from the world, you enter it fully, tied to your inner logos. You choose to be bound to Aletheia, to the order that connects you to the universe, not to the fabricated ideologies, not to the noise of lethe. And this choice is not made once, it's made every day, in small acts, in real work, in the community you build around you. Because change never comes from the top. It comes when small units, small vortices of true meaning are created at the grassroots level. One person at a time, choosing to remember. Anchibasien, then, is much more than an agonizing approach. It is the Heraclitean call for an absolutely conscious awakening, an active exit from lethe toward our inner logos, the one that connects us to the universe. The most difficult path to knowledge is not the accumulation of information, but the much closer step toward the source that is already within us. You question everything, even yourself. Is this not ultimately our only true philosophical and human mission? To stop searching for truth outside of ourselves and to begin remembering who we are. Heraclitus said it plainly. For those who are awake, the world is one and common. The sleeping retreat each into their own private world. So the question is no longer what is true, but what have you forgotten? And maybe this is where your Anchibasien begins. In which world are you living?